For this video, I wanted to talk through a presentation I did to a group of Australasian therapists about the difficulty of working with sex addiction and betrayal trauma and some of the unique features of why it's so hard. So I'm going to just rumble through some of the ideas and concepts here. So Patrick Kahn says there's a moment of truth that needs to happen for addicts, and this is regularly occurring in betrayal discovery. So sometimes we can arrive at an awakening, this moment of truth. For all addicts, a moment comes where they need to realize they have a problem, and sometimes that is off the back of being discovered. Sometimes it's just off the back of collapsing into the unmanageability that it can be a result of addiction. But that moment comes, and then the question can be for the person when they're sitting in front of me is, and I used to sort of swear at this point and refer to people's derrieres to say, well, am I an addict or am I a... But I just realized the disrespect in that for addicts. What we need to work out here is, look, have I been caught using something, doing something? Now, that sometimes this is most common with pornography. A man might be using porn, might use it occasionally. It might meet a criteria of abuse or addiction, but it doesn't fit the family. There's been some dishonesty and secrecy covering it up, but it would mean that the way that you treated it wouldn't be as an addict. And that makes things uniquely difficult. There's still hearts to repair, dishonesty to be able to be empathic towards, and new boundaries and goals for the relationship moving forward. So trust and safety can be reestablished. For others, it can be an abuse issue, that there's other things going on and there's a hypersexuality issue that happens. So there's an abuse of the sexuality component, but it might be due to bipolar or other mental health illnesses. So it's something that you would need to look at clearly. And then, does it meet the criteria of addiction, which we will go through in a second. But essentially, it's impaired control, compulsive use, continued use in spite of consequence, the phenomenon of craving that takes addicts back and back again to the scene of the crime. And it will also, if you're partnered, include a relational integrity disorder that Dr. Omar Menwala talks about if I'm maintaining an addictive process in secrecy, then it's injuring others in the family system, and we need to be able to own that. One of my favorite lines of Kahn's that tries to explain addiction is, there is a saying that addiction is the only disease that tells you that you don't have it. The degree that an addict can minimize use and its consequences is one of the most striking and common manifestations of addiction, as well as the most baffling to others. That's why in 12-step meetings it's so shame-reducing to go there. You can share your story and other people get it. They nod their head. But you say it in general population and people think we're crazy. So breaking through this denial is a critical component of addiction treatment, according to Patrick Kahn. Now, generally, if someone comes to me for sex addiction, there is other resources, that's for sure. Robert Weiss's Sex Addiction 101, the Pure Desire literature for Christian men. But facing the shadow will generally be a starting point. It's what I'm trained in. I'm a certified sex addiction therapist. And so within this is the first 7 tasks of Patrick Kahn's 30-point plan. The next thing addicts do, and I might just try and enlarge this just for the purpose of this exercise. The first question then a guy says, well, holy smokes, I'm an addict. How did I get there? And so early on, we're trying to establish sobriety and safety in the relationship. So, but we'll talk about this in general terms. But generally, adult trauma and stresses, genetics, learning and modeling, attachment, childhood stresses, exposure, depending on what the addiction is. This image is out of Facing Addiction, his in general addiction resource. So it does help sometimes for folks to just go, look, there's in these areas we will be looking for evidence of what might have predisposed us to develop this addiction. In saying that, pornography, like methamphetamine, there's a fair bit of evidence stating that those addictions don't need a lot of predetermining factors. They are so interruptive to the brain's reward system. They're a hyper, what they call a super stimuli, that they can really start to hijack the central nervous system pretty quick without any sort of pre-existing conditions. Patrick Kahn doesn't make the idea of recovery easy. He puts the course of recovery over time up against Joseph Campbell's The Hero's Journey, and most people don't want to hear that, look, if you meet the criteria of addiction and there's been relational harm here, that it could take, the course of at least 5 years to get into this sort of growth and maintenance stage, but 2 years and beyond. So the first 2 years are a pretty serious intervention. And so Khan's in his video, Why Treatment Works, really good resource to get the in-depth analysis of how he puts these two things together. Another tool I say to guys is, look, you're about to create this completely different direction in life, and largely, there's a saying in 12-Step Life: if you're trusting your own thinking, you're trusting the thinking of the last person you acted out with, the last person you had a drink with, had a drug with, who sexually broke boundaries with. So he uses the literature of Stephen Covey to try and come up with some provisional beliefs that people might need to hang on to get started. For the time being, you may not be able to trust your own perceptions. For the time being, you will have to trust that you're more damaged, or far more damaged than you know. For the time being, you must remember that addiction is a form of insanity in which you've been deluded about reality. We really can't trust our own thinking for a while. And for the time being, we must allow people to care for you. And so in the beginning, we've got to subscribe to a whole set of beliefs. Now, this is hard to do, but a lot easier to do when you've been pretty beaten. When you have that moment of truth that we started with, you can sometimes say, look, I'll do whatever you tell me. It doesn't last long, but it can get you started in recovery. One of the great papers on sex addiction and betrayal is by Dr. Omar Menwala. It will refer to this idea of a secret toxic basement, and this is what makes getting sober really difficult. Generally, if a man has been partnered, he's compartmentalized this addiction, he's gaslit others, he's misled them. If we've been caught for bits, we do staggered disclosure, a little bit of trickle truth, we're manipulating others. People are starting to get unwell around us as they worry about us, we're getting unwell, and we're basically living this life of deception with this secret exit that is poisoning the entire household. And the work of that Sexual Institute of Menwala is really stating you cannot separate the acting out and the addiction to the harm cause. You've got to address both at the same time. So this message can be found more in the model of Dr. Menwala through the Sexual Health Institute, and I won't go into the depth of it here because it would not do it justice, but he has got really good resources on the Sexual Institute. The Dr. Omar Menwala is his name. So this is what makes it difficult. On the right-hand side, or there, you've got the man, and the man is he's got sex addiction. That's a big enough issue. It's a mental health condition. That's going to take a lot. It's turning the Queen Mary in a harbour. It's going to be hard work. There could be other addictions, mental health issues, or physical health issues that now are being masked by this. There'll be an integrity abuse disorder. Dr. Menwala talks about living that secret life, misleading others. And where that becomes really significant, and that's why I sort of got that image of that person pointing, is, man, the person you really need the most help from is now really convicted and hateful and angry and can't believe what's happened. The whole world has changed. So this idea that due to this compulsive, entitled sexual behavior, all of that has meant that the one person you would usually get support from when you've got a health condition, a chronic health condition, is the one person that's been injured the most and therefore can't help you. And not only that, we've got to help them heal in this process. The other thing that's generally underneath is developmental trauma. And for most addicts, that is something we'll look for and go to, because any obsessive compulsive disorder is generally looking after a dis-ease, a discomfort, and we need to look at that. Now, partners on the other side, well, they've got a whole host of things they didn't ask for, don't deserve, but now are being called on to heal and do something about. And that can lead to a lot of early resistance and anger from partners. It's not my fault, I didn't do it. Why should I have to pay all this money for therapy and etc.? And of course, it's right. But there'll be discovery and disclosure trauma. The whole world changed in a moment. A discovery of an email or liaison or a history. There'll be betrayal trauma, complex PTSD issues that now, sometimes I have to say to guys, oh, she's hitting me, or she's yelling or screaming at the kids, or depressed and crying all the time. And I just have to say, well, was she like that when you met her? Or has she been like that since the discovery? There's deceptive compartmentalized sexual relational reality, meaning that, this is where you really need to read Minweiler's paper. But my take on that is their whole world, their whole sense of how they looked at family, husband, the whole thing is smashed like glass, like that image. Just completely. And I'm going to have a quick look because my little guy's gone off to hospital for asthma. He'll be okay though. This is where partners' whole worlds changed. They went from being capable of vulnerability and love in a relationship on the relational pyramid down to, I don't even know what the truth is. I don't know who you are. I don't know who I am. They become unrecognizable to themselves sometimes. So this deceptive sexuality trauma is generally what we're looking at as a trauma-focused model now. CSAT's like anyone else. If you've been around in this field for 35 years, we have gone from co-addictive models into trauma-focused models. Every therapist had to make that journey. So none of us can really claim indemnity from that. The other thing, though, that should always be looked at some point, because Robert Weiss wrote the incredible book Prodependence, really championing the roles of family members that go above and beyond, challenging the concept of pathologizing and making someone a codependent for this above and beyond behavior. So they've been deceived, and there might be some developmental trauma underneath, never assumed, always explored later on once the person has been validated and assured they've done the right thing by working really hard to get their partner into treatment. So a partner might come across a whole bunch, again, of resources, but through the International Institute of Addiction and Trauma and Addiction Professionals, they might start with Facing Heartbreak and Mending a Shattered Heart by Stephanie Carnes. Partners need the support. They were certainly one of the most underserviced cohorts, but now there's more and more fantastic resources that is available for partners. And so, what we come back to then is that in this discovery, we move from that real painful reality into this discovery and recovery and disclosure. There's a lot to be healed on both sides. Partners start their journey around this discovery and disclosure trauma. Addicts start their journey on the sex addiction trauma. We go from there. Now, what makes it hard is because of that, all the integrity breaches. When you had a reality model, and this is the model Pia Melody uses, the slide is the image they use at South Pacific Private, a great hospital for treatment in this area. They break that down to that CBT model that we take in data through the embodied brain, we cognitively give it a meaning, we have feelings about it, we will be motivated to do or not do some behaviors. Of course, everything that we use to filter is from our history, all our learned experiences, and all our core beliefs, right? What happens, though, is when you have trauma, that now for partners and for, on one side of that equation, the partner has got this complex PTSD, fight, flight, fawn, freeze reaction. And on the other side, now the addicts, got sober and their developmental trauma is bubbling up. So as two people are trying to make sense of this world, they're both being triggered and are both dysregulating. And so what we end up with is this sort of limbic form of ping pong that people end up attacking each other, fighting or flighting. It can happen with addicts. They freeze. The freezing really traumatizes the partner. And so pretty quickly, guys have to move in the direction of creating safety for their partners. And of course, it's a no-brainer, but they've got to be sober. Using a safer check-in by Dr. Jake Porter. The book Help Them Heal has got a lot of these tools in it. The AVR formula is acknowledge, validate, and reassure of Carol Jurgensen Sheets. Partners would benefit greatly from specialized betrayal trauma therapy and support groups of partners that have gone through the same thing. Addicts need to be in recovery and fully accountable. If you haven't got your devices and you haven't got Life 360, you're not providing an independent review of where you are, how you're spending your money, and what you're looking at on the net, then I think you're really not doing everything you can to get well. And then what will generally be considered as a full disclosure process. Now, that's that book I referred to. That's a great book for addicts to get, nearly in line with Facing the Shadow. Because if you've got a betrayed spouse, you've got to learn how to empathically respond when they're triggered. Otherwise, things are going to get really heated and nasty. Because if you defend, deflect, or disappear, that's going to activate their limbic system, and they're going to go ballistic. And you can go, oh, wow, my wife's gone crazy. But the fact is, I'm not empathically trauma focusing and helping her heal. This book is essential if you want to do that. The trigger busters in there, it really orientates you to what happens to a traumatized partner's brain, how to identify the trigger, orientate them to the here and now, de-escalate, create safety and stabilize using the AVR system, and how to, hopefully socially engage so this partner can regulate. We've got to get partners, help them to regulate, because they're so distressed and they don't know what's going on. The other thing is this AVR formula, which are these slides you can slow down, but I've done other videos on the AVR formula, and it just replaces defending, deflecting, or disappearing. In Dr. Jake Porter's work, he says stay on the coaster. So checking in. Partners, what addicts want to do is they sort of hide, lean away from their partner because I don't want to trigger you. Carol Jurgensen-Sheet says you've got to lean towards that. You've got to check in with somebody. And so a couple of the check-ins people can do out of Courageous Love, the book for couples healing from disclosure, is by Dr. Stephanie Carnes. And this is she's pulled this from the Lasser. From Shattered Vows. This is a good regular daily check-in that you can do. And the Safer check-in by Dr. Jake Porter, really good for a weekly check-in. This one's more balancing around the addict sobriety, the partner's safety. And these things, again, I've done YouTube videos for each one on the YouTube channel that you would be linked to watching this. So now these are hard to do. Addicts are largely got an intimacy disorder. They don't like being accountable. Partners have now got a regulation disorder because they've been deceived so much. So both people coming together and doing these, it takes a lot of coaching and a lot of patience because it's very difficult to do. Courageous Love is a good go-to guide. It's from ITAP, Dr. Stephanie Carnes, and it will take somebody through a full disclosure process. Why would you do it? It seems so counterintuitive. When a partner is discovered and therefore doesn't know the whole truth but knows part of the truth, they will never be able to fully feel safe again and trust again if they don't go through and realize what is the truth. So it discloses all integrity breaches. It answers all of the partner's questions. Partners delivers an impact statement that they read to an addict. The addict responds to that impact statement with an empathic emotional restitution letter. Boundaries and bottom lines are established to create safety, and this to create full transparency and integrity. And then the addict's in recovery, the betrayed partner's receiving support, and then they move on to do relational counseling for the couple. And I would and wished I had put right here, but it was because it hadn't just come out, but the book Help Them Heal by Carol Jurgensen-Sheet. So once a couple gets here, post disclosure, Help Them Heal would be the best book to continue to rebuild trust and get to forgiveness and love. So we're really moving from isolation of addiction to regulation to recovery, so creating safety and being present, treating addiction as treating trauma, really starting to either be mindfulness, meditation, prayer for people with Christian beliefs. Exercise, nutrition, and sleep are simply the three building blocks the brain needs to repair. Shrinking the inner and outer critic, that's the work of Pete Walker. You'll find those. If you've got developmental trauma, you'll find those on the my website. And if you're a partner, Pete's 13 tips of dealing with flashbacks is a great tool when you're triggered to help you regulate. Doing things that are really body-based, somatically based, massage, yoga, trauma release exercises to release stress and trauma from the body. Creating support communities. So knows Dr. Sharon Drayton has the phase groups in Australia, in Sydney, Sharon, Melbourne, Andrea Murray, Michael Rooney's another partner support person who runs groups, and then family restoration. So Here's those 13 tips for managing flashbacks. I'll just leave it there if you want to pause the screen and have a look at it. But it really goes through and deals with when we're triggered. I've done a video for partners on how to use these and a video for developmentally traumatized addicts to use it. So please look that up. So people move on and they do the disclosure. And in this book is the next tool that I want to describe why what I've just said is difficult and give it a graphic. They have this pyramid of intimacy, and they say that for us to be intimate, we need to have the ability to be vulnerable. To be vulnerable in a relationship, we need to be able to trust. And if we are going to trust, we have to feel safe. And safety generally comes from truth. Now, truth early on, they make the point is truth is assumed, right? So when that's been broken through some sort of betrayal, it blows the world up. So intimacy, there's an innate need for connection that we are born and made to attach in a healthy way. We desire to know and be known authentically, and that's what we're looking for. But if to do that, we need to be vulnerable. Vulnerability is sort of actively, it's a in the moment process. It means we take risks. We're willing to be a little bit uncomfortable. And it's the only way to know and be known. If we can be vulnerable, let someone in. And it's hard to do, no doubt, right? Impossible to do if there's no trust. So with trust, you need to trust to be vulnerable. Trust helps us manage fear, and especially fears of being rejected, abandoned, or exploited, right? So you have to have safety to have trust. So we've got to be safe physically, you've got to be safe emotionally, and it's the only way for trust to occur. And what happens when that compartmentalized life and all of the gaslighting and trust gets sort of chipped away at, it melts away. So sometimes we feel unsafe, but partners don't know it. They get really angry after disclosure and discovery because they go, oh man, I should have known. I should have seen this coming. I knew something wasn't right. And it's one of the things that they've got to repair is trusting their gut again. So truth. In a relationship, there's this expectation of truth. We assume people are going to be honest with us. We give people a benefit of the doubt, and that's what really makes this stuff painful when partners get a little bit of discovery. They check something out. The addict begs them, tells them, oh, no, you're wrong. How could I never do? Would I do that to you? And then, boom, they get the evidence they need, and it's like, oh, my God. And that's why they have that absolute collapse in their reality. So the idea here and the difficulty is, right, this pyramid, it collapses. And part of what recovery is about is rebuilding the pyramid, but we've got to start from the bottom up to get to truth. So the foundations of truth crumble, safety erode, trust dies, vulnerability gets locked behind walls, and intimacy just withers, right? Of course, painful. Now, what's hard for addicts? Addicts, well, they know the truth. They're relatively safe. They might have a fear of abandonment, but they're relatively safe. And they can regularly come back they can be vulnerable with their partner. They're wanting sometimes to be vulnerable. They're scared to do it, but they're capable of doing it, right? But for a partner, what I was going to say is that for an addict, because they know the truth, so they don't generally have trust and safety issues. They might have a fear of withdrawal, but they don't have this, where the partner does. The partner doesn't know the whole truth yet, especially if they're in that real no man's land of post-discovery, pre-disclosure. Worst time for a partner, scary time for an addict. So they don't know the truth, they don't feel safe, and they don't trust. So you've got this, these two people opposing each other. That's what triggers all this limbic stuff. That's why we need to. The only way out of this is learning to do the check-ins, mastering the AVR formula, and for both people to be able to take the energy from being triggered all the time off to their support groups and addicts to have that full recovery. The accountability is critical because partners don't trust us. Our word doesn't mean anything. And so it really does help in the AVR, in the reassure part, when you can say, is there anything I can do to help you feel safe right now? Would you like to go through my fill in the blank, whatever boundaries you got? Would you like to look at the 360 app and look at my movements? Would you like to go through the bank accounts? You have all my passwords. Would you like me to sit with you as you go through my devices? So that accountability and transparency is critical. And of course, the full disclosure process if you haven't done that already. So this recovery, repair, and renewal really is taking into account that addicts on the one side have to master The AVRs have to commit to the check-ins, have to commit to accountability, so the partner can slowly but surely get the truth they need, feel safer, start to trust, and both people, again, with that help them heal component, can actually move forward from recovery to repair to renewal. Teaching both partners and addicts to identify regression and regulate versus manipulate is going to be a critical part of this work. So recovery and repair and renewal will, partners are going to do their betrayal trauma therapy group support, learn regulation skills. I'm sorry, but you have to. If you've been traumatized now, commit to a full disclosure and ongoing recovery and boundary support. Intimacy building rituals with the partner, the check-ins. And then you get to this thing, this post-traumatic growth, this ongoing post-disclosure therapy move us to from finally getting the truth, feeling a bit more safety, feeling a bit more trust. The post-traumatic growth means that we start to master the regulation skills. For the addicts, got to be sex addiction recovery. And got to address any other addictions that are there. They also need to learn regulation skills. They've got to master the AVR formula. They've got to get used to and live within the boundary restrictions. They've got to do that willingly. It's ridiculous to insist that your partner lessens those. Our word has no value for a long time. And where possible and where necessary, we do our own developmental trauma recovery. There it is. I thought I might have put it in there. So the Help Them Heal book is the book that then both people can go on and continue to heal with. And I think I put this at the end for the therapist, and I think it's just as good for addicts and betrayal trauma spouses. I saw this at a restaurant when we were doing our training in Arkansas, and it always sort of helped me because recovery is hard work. So if you're struggling with it and you're finding that this is hard for you, it's very hard. And I think that's where our cohorts of support are critical. For a betrayed spouse to be able to go to her cohort and be able to say, look, I'm really struggling, and get that support. For addicts to be able to go and talk about their struggles. It helps us to get the support we deserve and need. There would have been questions for discussion in this talk. We had lots of discussion on that day. If you've got lots of questions, please seek out your sponsor in your 12-step fellowship or take it to your therapist. I hope this has been useful in explaining just the depth and difficulty of addressing sex addiction and betrayal trauma, just from discovery right through to disclosure, right through to post-traumatic growth. And with that, I will finish this video. Bye.